Trust Your Struggle is a place of inspiration. We have these conversations with individuals about the monumental struggles that they've had in their life, what they've done to overcome them, how these struggles and what they've done have kind of helped define who they are today. Landon has worked on such projects as Blink-182, 311, Star Wars, Bayside, and the first Taste of Chaos tour. At an early age, he knew he could make money doing art, and if he was going to have to work hard at doing something, that he was going to do what he loves. His first childhood home was a small apartment in the back of a meat processing plant, where they would have to crawl under beef carcasses to get to the fridge. He would spend nights with his mom at her janitorial job where he watched the first episode of The Simpsons. And at age 7, he started helping his dad work on mobile trailers until he was about 20 years old. His parents came home miserable each day, and that was his realization that he didn't want to live that kind of life and pushed forward with his dreams. To this day, Landon believes that no matter what you do in life, you have to work hard.
We're paid to make things look pretty.
Yeah, we're paid to. It doesn't mean we have to live that way.
I was having an interesting talk with a friend of mine yesterday about how I feel very blessed and lucky that I get to live in a society that I can make a living as an artist, because it shows how advanced and just how lucky we are that we could spend money and support people who want to refine this craft for a living. Because if we lived in a society that was way not as well off as ours, we wouldn't have, people would still be fulfilling that need for art on a grassroots level. And like, you know, I think back like ancient Greeks, how they would whittle toys out of their wood for their children and stuff like that. Like you have soldiers making toys and hobbyists, and people are always going to make art, but we live in such a society to where people are too lazy to do it, so they just pay other people to.
Or they found people that are better at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, dude, that's very true. I mean, we are very fortunate to be doing what we do, where we do it. So.
Yeah.
And you get to use your talents to provide.
Yeah, very, very lucky with that. That's because I grew up in a household, talk about it in the discussion, or like my mom has a GED, my dad has a high school diploma, and so and they both own their own businesses, but they own their own businesses because of hard work, and I got to see how hard they worked every day. And like my mom was a janitor at businesses when I was like local like immediate cares and like the local cable company, just, you know, whatever businesses she could get business from. So I spent my childhood nights sitting in waiting rooms while my mom was like cleaning offices and cleaning the back rooms of places. And I have a fond memory of watching the first episode of The Simpsons on a black and white television with one of the little cable box like top clickers in the actual break room of the cable company in Little Farmington, New Mexico, because my mom was cleaning them that night. And that was the only place I got to see cable, was either there or at my grandma's. And so we used to, oh man, was it? It was like an urgent care place that we had in our small little hometown. I used to play in their little kids area every night while I'm cleaning their offices.
So you were constantly entertained when you were going to work with your mom?
Yeah, she had no other option, because she was, God, at that time she had to be around 20, 21, and I was around 4 or 5, so you could do the math about when she had me.
Yeah.
And just a little 5'0" woman lifting buffers and cleaning supplies out of her van, and I'd have to go read Highlights magazine and play around with the toys that the kids played in the waiting room all day.
Oh man, Highlights magazine was the best.
Dude, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Think about how many illustrators got paid to do that, and graphic designers.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, dude. and that was around for I don't know how. I don't know. I'd have to look to see. I don't know how long it's been around, but it was around for a long ass time.
Wasn't it? It was.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Oh,
So why don't
man.
we do a little introduction, dude? Let's
Yeah.
let people know who we're talking to over here, and if you can, try not to swivel in your chair too much because you're getting me motion sickness.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No, it's
I
all good. I'm just fucking with you.
constantly have to move because being still bothers me.
Oh, dude. I mean, you can rock back and forth. That's totally cool. I don't mind that at all. But it was this whole like thing right here. I was like, oh man.
Yeah. I was contemplating just having this whole thing, you looking at my hands while I sketch something, because I really don't like being the center of attention. I'd rather have my work or those around me. I don't feel like I really deserve the spotlight on anything.
But you feel like your work does.
Yeah. I don't know.
Well,
some weird reason I feel like my work has more value than I do.
I think it's good for people to see the man behind the curtain, like Wizard of Oz over here.
Wizard or something. All right, my name is Landon Armstrong. I am a drawer of things. I've been a professional illustrator for 16 years. I'm now 38 years old. I got my bachelor's from multimedia arts and animation at the Art Institute of Phoenix, RIP. I grew up in the Four Corners area of northwestern New Mexico in a small little four stoplight town that still only has 4 stoplights called Aztec.
Crazy. What's near? What would be near Aztec? Like the closest.
Durango, Colorado is 23 miles north across the border. So if you ever went to southern Colorado for skiing and snowboarding, Durango was a pretty hip place. The Aztec ruins are in Aztec, of course, and that was a people that predated the Anasazi, and just one day up and disappeared. So our other claims to fame are green chili. We're really big with that up there. There was supposedly an alien UFO crash in the 60s that
Oh, damn.
since our city saw how well Roswell was doing with that, we thought we'd try to make a big deal about it as well.
And did you go snowboarding a lot up in Durango?
I wish I had some opportunities to go when I was a child. I spent my teenage years and child years doing a lot of skating. And by skating, I mean fruit booting. I did skateboard a little.
Oh, yeah.
Dude, I was total like, give me some USDs or K2 K2 skates. I used to my first skates were rollerblade Dirks, and but it was where I grew up was so small, and the skating community was so small in general. Like the rollerbladers and the skateboarders all got along, so I didn't have to deal with any of the big city BS to where like you skate you suck, you skateboard you suck. I mean, our skating areas were such a precious resource that we all just shared and were really cool with each other. The only people we really hated were the BMX riders because their pegs would destroy everything. And
Yeah.
when I was like 16 or 17, we had a really crappy skate park in a neighboring town called Farmington, and so the BMX guys tried to push in our turf, and they got this big wooden ramp and built it right in the middle of the skate park. So I went down one night with a bunch of gasoline and burned it down. And I later became great friends with those guys. And so,
really?
Yeah.
Did you ever?
No, they never knew. So, if any of you guys were riding your bikes around 96 to 2000 in Aztec and wonder who burnt down your ramp, it was me. I'm really sorry about it. They ended up finding. They ended up actually, the big core group of these guys became Christians and built a skate park at a local church soon after all this happened. And for the little area that we had, it was a pretty nice setup, and they stopped being jerks. And so it was we became really good friends with them after that. But I never had the courage to tell them, like, yeah, I
Right.
ramp.
Burn your shit down. That's really interesting though, like that everyone got along, because within the skate community and like the guys who do the inline skating and stuff like that, like in a larger city, it was button heads all the time. Like you just did not get along. So that's cool. You guys were like united in that way.
Yeah,
Just kind of enjoying and going out and doing your own thing together.
it's definitely given me a really interesting perspective. As far as like the issues, people rag on small towns a lot, but the issues that we just didn't have to deal with. Like I grew up in a small town where there was just as many Smiths and Armstrongs as there was as Yazzies and Garcias. I grew up right on the edge of the Navajo Indian Reservation, and I spent my dad was for a big part of my childhood a just a handyman, and he ended up being a contractor for in where I grew up. Mobile homes were kind of like the main housing unit, and so manufactured homes were a big business. So I spent my summers working with my dad, and I'd go out to like Chin Lee and past Shiprock and all throughout the Navajo Nation, skirting houses and installing air conditioners and uh, putting finishing up double wides after people bought them. And so
Gotcha.
yeah, it was never like I never really grew up with a any like divisions as far as like race and superficial things, because it seems like when you're in a smaller community, you're just trying to survive. And if,
Right.
of course there was like assholes. There's assholes in every community and people with just backwards thinking, but they were all just like pushed to the side, and was never really a big deal where we grew up. And so,
And how old were you when you were working on the trailers with your dad?
oh man, like 7 to 20.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
dude, that's crazy.
That's probably one of my biggest influences of being an artist or wanting to be an artist, is because I just saw how hard that he had to work. And I was
Right.
like,
All the manual labor.
screw this. Yeah. Yeah. Like both my mom and dad I had a really interesting childhood and a really blessed childhood, because my mom, her dad died when she was 10. And luckily her grandfather was still around, but my mom lost her dad at 10. He was one of the guys on the ship that took the huge, it was Operation Ivy, not the punk band, but the actual uh,
Oh, damn.
military operation that they're named after, where they took Big Mike to the Southern Pacific and blew up that bomb that was way bigger than it was supposed to be. Everyone on my grandfather's ship got radiation poisoning and developed cancer. So he died of cancer when my mom was really young.
Oh,
And then my dad, my grandfather's dad died when he was young, and he was a pig farmer. So my grandfather didn't have an education and just started running a farm at the age of 10. And my dad comes from, and when my dad was born, they shipped up and moved to northern Alberta, where my grandfather ran a pig farm during the summer and went and roughnecked in the Northern Territory of Canada during the winter. And so when my mom and dad got together, my mom was like 15 and my dad was like 19 and 20, and they got married pretty soon after that. And then, like most young kids, they had all these plans about having fun and building a life together. And then 2 months after they got married, my mom got pregnant with me. And their first home, my first home, was in the back of a meat processing plant that my grandfather at that time was a butcher, and my dad was doing scaffolding for like these huge oil rigs and stuff like that in Texas, and my grandfather got sick with cancer, and so he came back and helped run his butcher shop and his meat processing plant. And after building after giving up that job, we didn't really, and moving back to Texas, didn't have a place to stay, so we lived in the back of the meat processing plant in a little apartment that was built on it. And like to get to the fridge, and my mom would have to crawl under beef carcasses and hanging pieces of meat
Dude.
just
Wow.
to get stuff out of the fridge. And soon after that, though, we did get into our first trailer, and it's been uphill. But like, my parents started with nothing, and the whole point of me like getting through that is they really started on the bottom of the barrel, but I never felt it. Like, and that I really admire that about my parents, and I'm thankful for that. Is like we struggled through a lot of things. When I was a little kid, my dad has a weird condition. I don't know the name. What his he was working on an oil rig, and he was in the middle of having lunch, bitten something down to get it out of his lunchbox, and his retina detached, and his blood just started filling his eyeball. And we went down to have the corrective surgery, and they screwed up on it. And so my dad he had to have 5 follow-up surgeries on his eye, and he does really bad on anesthesia, so he had to be awake during all these surgeries. So being awake while someone is digging in your eye with that, and he couldn't do any strenuous work because the pressure could possibly detach his retina, and he'd be blind in that eye.
Right.
And so there was a good half a year where it was just my mom like cleaning businesses and cleaning houses whenever she could, just to make ends meet, and never felt like I was poor, never felt like I was in danger of being on the streets. Like I really got to thank my parents for that. And
yeah, they made things happen, but that's the thing is like when you're a kid, you don't really. I mean, for the most, I don't really know if you know your environment.
Yeah.
And unless you're exposed to other things, like you just know what you know. It was awesome. Your parents were just grinding to just make shit happen.
Yeah, and because of them working so hard, I've always like I've seen some of your other interviews, and I've always knew I wanted to be an artist. It was the concept of somebody being a kid and not knowing what they wanted to be when they grow up is foreign to me, and it like kind of like freaks me out. I honestly can't process how people go through life like that.
So you don't recall a time like in your life where you didn't know you were an artist? Like it's always been that way. Like you don't know any different, huh?
Absolutely. And which is really
Crazy.
hard growing up in a small cowboy town because
Did you do a lot of cowboy art or what?
No, it's just all the kids are playing football. Their dads either work in agriculture or in the oil fields, and you're this kid who's just sitting around drawing. You're a freaking nobody. And like I had no interest in doing like football and baseball, and I did a little of that when I was a kid, but I knew it wasn't my thing. And surprisingly, from coming from the background that they did, my dad has always been very supportive of my art. And my first memories that I have in interacting with my dad is one, he had a Frank Frazetta, the Silver Warrior piece that he had a canvas print of, and I thought it got ruined. I didn't know he got rid of it way later down the road, or else I totally would have snaked him from it, because it was a legit nice canvas print of and it's the Frazetta piece of the guy in silver armor who's being pulled by two polar bears on a sled, for anybody who knows who Frank Frazetta is. And that's like one of my first memories of art, is looking at Frank Frazetta. And my other memories with my dad is I was 3 years old, and we're watching movies like Nausicaa and the Valley of the Wind, and these crazy animes that we rented from this local video store called Tiger Video. And it's just like those memories with my dad. I think I just is like, this is what I want to do. And he was still working in meat processing at that time, so he'd bring home just rolls of butcher paper, and I would take him to my room, and I would draw out Mario Brother levels, because I was really, late 80s, early 90s. I was big into Mario. So I would always I would go back and I'd design my own levels, and I'd be like thinking like what would be challenging for Mario to do. And then when I wasn't doing that, I would be drawing Ninja Turtles off the back of the toy packages, and
Yeah, dude.
trying to just trying to build my skills doing that. And so I've
That's awesome.
a very very young age. I think I knew in like fifth grade that I could make money being an artist. My fifth grade teacher, Mr. Parks, had his comic book collection in his classroom, and it was the first time I put the two together. That like, oh, you can sit down, you can get people to pay you to draw pictures. This is what I want to do with my life. And my dad has always been really supportive of that, and it was from that point on I started buying how to draw books and books on anatomy and perspective, and I've just kind of feel bad because for studying it for so long, I should be a lot better than I actually am. but but it's I've always knew that I wanted to be an artist because I've seen the struggles of my mom and dad have just come home miserable, and I they did what they had to do, and the idea got put into my head at a young age that to make it in life, no matter what you do, you have to work hard. And if I'm going to have to work hard, I want to work hard at doing something that I love.
Absolutely.
And so that's why full speed ahead. Just so yeah, it totally blows my mind that people like my wife didn't know she wanted to be a psychologist until she was in college, and it just blows my mind. Like I have no idea how you can do that.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's to be said about a lot of people. That's why they go to college and try and figure it out. And I think you're very fortunate to know that at a young age and just keep pursuing it throughout your life. And now, still doing it now.
Yeah.
With where you're at, that's awesome. So were you into comics and stuff like that? Did you collect
Oh,
comics and?
totally. Like if I zoom the camera over a little bit, you'd see like my 10 or 12 long boxes that I have. I kind of stopped in the like around 2010, just because I needed to start putting my money elsewhere. But I really appreciate comics. Comics heavily influenced my style of art, and where like growing up, I think the first artist I really appreciated out of comic books was Joe Madureira. I'm a total
Yeah.
Joe mad fan. My first comic book like series that I remember collecting as a kid was the whole Age of Apocalypse storyline, and I still have those. But his style was just so unique for the time, and I just loved everything about it. It's just so freaking cool. And
Do you see some of their inspirations in the work that you do today?
oh, yeah, I try. With what I do today, part of the reason that I've been able to do what I do is I try not to, and this I'm not saying this is good advice, but I've had to get to a point where I could mimic other styles successfully. So the that has afforded me the ability to have more work from different areas of life and different venues and industries. But I've also really never had the time to sit down and develop what I think is my style. And I think when I
Gotcha.
do sit
Yeah.
down and draw what I want to draw, I definitely see that influence. But especially now, since I'm a father and I don't have near as much free time as I once had, it's rare that I just get to sit down and draw something for myself.
Yeah. Hopefully, you'll be able to make that happen soon, though, and
Yeah,
get some personal projects going. So.
yeah. Right now, I got 2 under 3, and so my life is pretty,
Yeah,
pretty.
dude. Your
Yeah.
plate is full for sure. Oh, but I mean, like you said though, with you being an illustrator and being able to switch up the styles, there's not a lot of illustrators that can actually do that and do that well. So, props to you for being able to, you know, do something that's cartoonish or do something that's a little more like realistic or whatever that may be, depending on like what your client's needs are. So I think that provides you with a good value with what you're doing.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate that, and I've been very fortunate in the jobs that I found to kind of like foster that in my career. The good thing about that, and what I really appreciate about that, is the projects would go long enough for me to really dive in and try to dissect and get the ins and outs of an art style, but then it wouldn't stay there long enough to where I get pigeonholed in it, and I'd be able to go on to something new. So it was something totally like the interest was always there, and it was never like I never got to a point where I felt like I was just doing the repetitive same old thing. And
Right.
Each illustration has its own set of challenges, and you never do something the same way. So it's just a constant series of learning and refining, and that and that's probably why I never like everything I went to school for. Um, Again, knowing I wanted to be an artist, I was expecting to be a comic book illustrator. I went down to the Art Institute of Phoenix because I saw that they had a couple illustration program classes in their art animation program, and I thought that that would be enough to give me the knowledge that I needed to be a comic book illustrator. And I've been fortunate enough to do a couple small things in comics, but once I became a once I got out into the career field, I realized that comics are just really too repetitive for my personality, and I need the freedom to explore and just change up subject matter every once in a while, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Keep it fresh all the time. You don't
Yeah,
get bored with it.
yeah. I couldn't. I love, I could maybe paint Wolverine once a year, but if I had to sit down and draw him every day, 365, that would just, I'd be beating my head against a wall.
Yeah, exactly, dude. No, I feel you. I couldn't do that either. There's no way. I mean, I can't draw like that, but even still, like even with design, like designing the same stuff over and over again, I like to switch it up.
Your
It just keeps
illustration,
things interesting, and like I think when you work on those projects, you learn something from each one of those that you can apply to the next job in the
yeah,
future.
yeah, totally. And your illustration skills are pretty darn good, man. Don't sell yourself short on
Oh, dude. But,
that.
I appreciate that, but yeah, it's like when you're talking to someone like yourself, like no. But so you've been, professional since you graduated the Art Institute for the most
Luckily,
part.
yeah, yeah. I have when we first started working together, I still sold car stereos at Circuit City for I think about 5 or 6 months through that
Circuit City,
holiday
talk
season.
about RIP, dude.
I know, man. Yeah,
Wow.
I used to be way into car stereos when I was a kid, really really good investment. And
What's really funny though is like part of my career was at Rockford
yeah,
Fosgate with
yeah.
our audio, so that's really weird.
Yeah, no, I worked at the like Rockford Fosgate retailer of the Southwest when I was worked in New Mexico.
I dude.
Worked there, and I worked at a pawn shop selling car audio and guitars and electronics. That was my once I stopped working with my dad, that's what I mainly did was working car audio and did a minor retail for like the pawn shops and worked down a comic book store to get myself through the Art Institute. But yeah, I've been very fortunate to. I've had most of my career. I've worked more than one job at a time, but that all the jobs have been art related, which is a huge blessing. I started off working at DSG doing the vending stuff, and then when that went under, I did freelance for probably a good 2.5 years from 2007 to 2009, and then in 2009 I got into the casino gaming industry because that's after Fox left Phoenix, and I didn't really want to leave Phoenix. I enjoyed going to school down here. I stayed for your college sweetie, and then of course when that falls apart, I already built my network of friends here, and it's like I don't want to go start anywhere else. And so once Fox left, I the only real jobs for somebody with animation experience and a little bit of character animation experience is in the gaming industry. We had a lot of studios that did that here due to us
Yeah, we did.
to Las Vegas. And started off as a 2D artist for a company called DesignWorks. Worked my way up to art director there. I was art director there for a greater part of a year, and it was a time where I met my wife. And along with that, at this time, I started teaching at the Art Institute of Phoenix. I had a couple, about a year and a half, where I was working a 9 to 5 studio job. I was teaching at the Art Institute of Phoenix 3 nights a week, and then I was doing freelance.
Damn. So if anyone's listening or watching, Landon knows how to grind.
Dude, it was well, it helps when you make a lot of stupid decisions when you're younger, and you have to like rectify those decisions. So I killed like about $12,000 of credit card debt in a year, and so yeah, it was just correcting mistakes. But I was doing that up to the point where I met my wife, and it soon came very clear that once I met my wife that I couldn't work 3 jobs anymore, and so I gave up teaching, and I did. And this was around the time when I was art director also at DesignWorks Gaming. When I was art director, we were going through a period to where the roles really didn't have any definitions because we're growing so rapidly, and like who does what. And so I'm somebody who does really good when I have clear parameters to work in. And when I'm sitting there trying to guess what you want and trying to not necessarily knowing my roles, it was just a really frustrating place for me. And that frustration led to me eventually getting was it? I guess a good way to say it is just a mutual separation from
Nice.
DesignWorks. But right when all this went down, I just got married. I think we were about 2 months into a new marriage together, our lives together. I ended up leaving my job. I was having since 2007. I have weird numbing issues with the right side of my face, and I later found out that it was due to a bad tooth extraction when they removed my wisdom teeth. But I have slight paralysis around my eye. Like I constantly feel like I'm asleep, like my face is asleep right here. It travels around my near ear and goes down my jaw. So like my face is tingling, like it's just trying to wake up from a sleep constantly.
Whoa, that's crazy.
I started looking into it at this time, and I had to go get a CAT scan. Yeah, and when I got the CAT scan, I guess I twitched or something like that, but I got told I had a brain aneurysm. And things obviously worked out at the end, but I just lost my job, got told I had a brain aneurysm, and my wife went to go visit a friend who was just in a brutal car accident and ended up totaling her car. So I had these 3 life events happen all within a 2-week period, and a 2-month period if you include me just getting married.
Hey, dude, you're newly married, and like, hey, we just got married, and I have an aneurysm.
Yeah. You can imagine my wife felt great at the time because she's like, great, I just found this guy that I love, and there's a chance that he just might up and drop dead at any moment.
Yeah. Talk about testing your guys' strength after just getting married.
Yeah. No, my wife, I'm a very, very lucky guy for
sure.
to have a woman who would stick with me with all my faults and through stuff like that. But
was your wife okay from the car accident that she was in during that same time?
Yeah. Luckily, man, she barely had a scratch and bruise on her, and my personality, again, like I was explaining how my family is just so much. I come from a family my second night of moving out of the house when I was a teenager, like my first taste of freedom was moving to a small town 15 miles away called Farmington. I went from a town of 5,000 people to 50,000 people. My roommate was trying to scare me, and so he pointed my other. I lived with two guys. Took my other roommate's compound bow and was trying to scare me with it, just because small town kids, we're bored and nothing to do. He ended up shooting me through the leg. And so luckily it was a practice tip. It went right in behind my knee. I didn't know until I went to the hospital that it came through both sides, because I, like an idiot, looked down and saw an arrow on my leg, instinctively like ripped it out like
Oh my god, dude.
and hobbled up to my room and like tied my leg off with a belt and had him drive me to the ER. And I called my family, and the first words out of my mom's mouth, and this was like at 11:30 at night. I was like, "Mom, my roommate shot me through a leg with an arrow. Should I go to the emergency room?" She's waking up in a daze, and she's like, "How far did it go in?" She's like, she totally
damn.
didn't want to put up with my crap. But so
Yep.
once I saw that my wife was fine, I immediately went into how do I fix this mode, and that's kind of like
Gotcha.
my personality. I see a problem and I want to try to fix it to my best ability, and which wasn't the right thing to do, because I've lost my job. We just now lost this car. I'm thinking, okay, I got this friend who works security at concerts. I can maybe pick up some shifts there and start. I immediately going into
Survival mode.
how are we going to get through this? How are we going to survive this? And all my wife needed was me to like be there for her emotionally, and that's like, where I really dropped the ball on that one. And so I like to say I'm getting a little better at it, but it's one of the.
Well, she's still with you, so I would guess so.
We'll see for how long. No. You can only put up with so much of my crap.
She's done it for a while. So.
My kid, yeah. No.
So did you, after the gaming stuff, did you just decide to go freelance full time after that?
Well, I was lucky, man. I'm very blessed on how things work out. I would like to say that, like, everything that has happened to me is just because I've been so prepared for situations. But I just don't have any other word better than luck. The day that I quit working for DesignWorks, the only other real big competitor for DesignWorks in the town, posted a job for a graphic artist. And so I was able to transition immediately from this small studio to this other studio that was DesignWorks was a small independent company. I immediately went over to Firebird Studios, which was a small satellite studio for a larger company at the time that was called Bally Technologies. So if you've heard like Bally Hotels and stuff like that.
Yeah, dude, in Vegas, right?
Yeah. So it was one of their satellite studios, and I came in as a studio artist, or a graphic designer level 2 is what they hired me as. And I worked there for another 4 years. It was 2012. November 2012 is when I started there. I worked there until January 2017. And the reason I quit was because my wife and I were pregnant with our first child. And we had the options of me keeping a day job and doing freelance and trying to pay for child support, as far as like child support, child care. Yeah, that's what I meant to say. And or I stay home, since I have the ability to make money from my house, and like try to spend time with my daughter. And with my parents working as hard as they did to provide, one thing that I did grow up with, what I didn't grow up with, was them being around that much. And that's something, sorry guys, something on my computer screen. That's something that I try, like I still fight guilt about. I have the luxury of working from home, and I get to see my daughters every day, but I still worry about working too much around them. Because one, I enjoy really what I do for work, and so it's really easy for me to get sucked into, hey, I'm going to go work on this piece. The idea that I need to be a great provider for them, so I need to work as much as I can to afford them the things that they need to be successful in this life. And but
But
they,
really quick, dude, like, you
yeah,
know, just to like add into that is like they're around, they know you're passionate about, or they're gonna see that you're passionate about what you do, um, and how driven you are with that. So that's a good. I think that's kind of a good lesson to show your kids is like,
yeah,
dude, love what you do and you'll be passionate about it and it doesn't really feel like work. Yeah, of course, like there's times where it's going to be, but that's something you want to do. It's part of you.
yeah.
And you're teaching that to them, which you didn't really get, from you growing up. It was more of go to a job and put in the time to
Mm-hmm.
do it, as opposed to like, I love doing this and this is what I want to do.
Yeah, absolutely, and I do appreciate that aspect. But being a business owner, you never separate yourself from your business. And
Right.
so, like,
Exactly.
yeah, I mean, you know this as well as I do. You just can never fully check out. And I'll be at the playground pushing my kid on the swings, get an email from a client about an illustration that I got to do, and so that balance, and we're all imperfect, so I'm never going to do that balance correctly, and I know I'm going to screw up with some aspect of it, but like it weighs on me to try to do as good of a job as I can on that. And you don't get a body like mine by not sitting in front of a drawing desk for 8 to 12 hours a day. So
Oh, dear.
I try to think about like health issues. I want to be around when my kids are older, but now I'm watching a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old during the day, and while my wife is at work, and then when she comes home, trying to help with the family. I start work probably about 8 o'clock at night and go till about 2 or 3 in the morning, and then wake up and do it again. And that's
Damn. Well,
been my
waking up early too, because those kids
yeah.
do not sleep in.
Yeah. I've been running on about 18-hour days for the past 3 years.
Wow. Do you think that you're used to it now? Like, have you become acclimated to that lifestyle?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely get. I'm used to it. It doesn't mean I still prefer it.
Of course, yeah.
Like it's I'm really looking forward to the day when both of my girls are at least in kindergarten, But these times are great, and I'm at the stage of life where my daughter thinks every time she toots it's hilarious.
Of course it is. I
And
would have to agree with her.
my littlest can't talk yet, and so she's just like screaming at me because Frozen is over with these like rah, 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 and it's just I just love little moments like that so
Yeah,
much.
dude.
So those little joys make it like are definitely worth it. And I've been able to see my daughters take all their first. I've seen first steps, first words, just all of the big milestones I've been lucky enough to be here and see. And that is a truly amazing thing for me and something I'm really grateful for. But
Yeah, dude, you're so fortunate to be in that situation, to be
still
around them for
sleep
that.
though. Oh, sorry.
What's that?
I still miss sleep though.
Oh, yeah, it's overrated. Damn. Well, yeah, it sounds like. I mean, it's not easy, dude. It's definitely that whole thing is that struggle is definitely a struggle for sure. Because it's like you're trying to do your art and provide for your family, and then also be there for your kids like during the day, and it's challenging, dude. It's one of the most challenging things I think you'll ever do in your entire life.
Yeah, yeah, it is, and we all have our challenges, and it's never like I just wish like everybody, no one has an easy life. I'm sure
Of
you
course.
more money, more problems. That's we
That's what
even
they
look
say.
at the celebrities of our culture, and they have even though they have all this privilege above us, they still struggle through the day. And I don't know, I'm very blessed that I have my family around me, and I have this idea and this belief that even through my worst times and my worst struggles, that there's something meaningful behind it, and that something, it's not pointless, and that
Oh yeah,
when it gets really hard, that's still a comfort that keeps me going.
that's your drive.
Yeah.
So
So,
what besides your drive, but what things inspire you? What are you inspired by?
oh man, besides the obvious family and like just the kids and all the cheesy like dad answers, because I'm still very much in the new dad young kid mode of life where every little amazing thing they do is amazing. um Music, I really enjoy, even though my tastes are primarily stuck in like the punk scene of the late 90s and early 2000s.
What some of those bands, dude?
Oh man, my first punk band, my first concert was No Use for a Name and Diesel Boy
Oh yeah.
at the Nile Theater. I drove 8 hours from Aztec to come see them down at the Nile, and I
Wait,
got
the
to go.
Nile in Arizona, in
Yeah,
like what, Mesa or whatever?
yeah,
Whoa, dude.
yeah,
Damn, that's crazy.
yeah. One of the cool things, like one of the privileges of not having my parents around as a child, was the fact, like my dad had a philosophy that he pretty much gave me free reins as long as the cops didn't get involved. He always told me that, like, well, he didn't tell me, but once I got older, he was like, the moment you got in trouble with the cops was going to be the moment that we like pulled in the reins a little bit on you. And I was just lucky enough to never really get in trouble with the cops. And so I was a uh, junior in high school, and it was spring break, and me and four of my other high school buddies, I think two seniors and two freshmen, brought my little 97 Nissan Altima, and we slept 10 miles south of Chandler on a dirt road for a week while we just hit the Valley's skate parks, and five teenage kids not showering, going skating all day hard in the middle of
Dude, that's so
March.
punk rock.
Dude, it was awesome. Like, I quit a job once when like I worked two fast food jobs when I was in high school. One at a little place called an A&W, and then I did work at McDonald's my senior year. I quit my job at A&W because I was skating in Utah, and I didn't want to go back to work the next day. I wanted to extend the trip
Like, fuck it.
a little bit longer. So I was like, yeah, I think I gave him a couple days notice. I knew I didn't have to work for a couple more days. So I had the decency to call them while I was on the road and be like, yeah, I'm not going to show up for any of my shifts. So, you know, and I think at the end of that trip, I was in Moab, Utah, and I had a 1987 Subaru GL at that time, just a small little sedan. And growing up in the boonies, I'd always take my cars back into the hills, and like I used to jump this thing, so ridiculous. I treat this like trash. One of my friends hit this car with their truck and ended up bending the bumper, so and the trunk lid, so it wouldn't close properly. So I had to use a bungee to close it. And
Nice.
my dad backed into the car the second day that I had it, or something like that. It was a poor little sedan, but I was driving in Moab, Utah, and I made a U-turn in a road because we were breaking a pallet for firewood by holding it to the roof of our car, driving about 50 or 60 miles per hour and just letting go of it and letting it smash on the freeway. And as we did that a couple times, I made a U-turn and my tire fell off. Like my whole A-frame for my back, no, my front driver's side tire just fell off, and I had to wait for a sheriff to come. Sheriff just drove by, luckily, and he helped us actually bounce this little car off the road. It was kind of a cool thing that he showed us, but he bounced it up and down while me and my friends pushed it, and we were able to get my car off the road. And my mom, I had to call my mom the next morning. It was my first experience hitchhiking into a town which was cool. And
Damn.
I had to call my mom, and she had to drive like 200. I think that's like 200 or 300 miles to get from Aztec to Moab. So she drove that far that day to pay a mechanic to fix my car, so I could drive home the next day. And,
Wow, dude.
it was a hell of a trip.
Your mom's a very patient lady.
She is. I'm very,
Wow.
very blessed for the people who are in my life, because I'm a kind of a ridiculous person, and
That's what makes you awesome, dude. So you said you were inspired by punk rock music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
punk, bluegrass. Funny or not, because it's just kind of like acoustic punk. I've always like Bela Fleck and the Flecktones. I was really big into. Again, where I grew up, a weird like. All my friends were into punk music, but they're also into like bands like Fish and the Grateful Dead, and we just kind of like liked what we liked, and a lot of my friends were potheads at the time, and so I get into I get introduced to a lot of interesting music at that time, and where to be countercultural, where we were, the cool people listened to your top 40 stations, country, and your basic alternative. So it was like we were only left with like punk and these other weird extreme fringe parts of music if we wanted to stand out and be cool.
Right.
But street art, I've always been in, like, which is weird again growing up where there's really no buildings or tagging, like any places to really tag. I've always been influenced by graffiti artists. I've been lucky enough to work with a bunch in my career. Max 242 started off as somebody who I studied his work off as a young designer, and met him at a convention in 2012, and now like we're really great friends, and I've got to be introduced to a lot of people in that community that I've respected for a long time. And now,
and you guys collabed on some pieces too, right?
yeah, he has single-handedly got me into the concert poster market.
Have you worked with other bands, or have you worked on like some band stuff? Because you're talking about posters.
Yeah,
like
my first collaboration with him is not like, it wasn't publicly announced, not officially announced, but he did a concert poster for Blink-182 Saskatchewan, Canada show. I think this had to be around 2016, 2017. And I ended up he did the concept for it, and I did the initial line work and rendering. And then he went back and did some coloring and the final touch-up details. Before that,
I like to call it the Max Magic.
dude, his knowledge of value and just the way he's able, really, it's such a small thing, but if you could do rim lighting just right, it's like what makes or breaks a piece, and so many people really pay that much attention to it. But that bounce lighting is something that you have to love. And yeah, and so that was my first collab with him, and we did a 311 Halloween poster together, some Star Wars posters together that unfortunately never made it to market, but they were officially licensed posters for Star Wars that we did some pieces on or did some work on, and it just, yeah, one of those things that fell through the cracks, unfortunately. But
that's fucking awesome. Like, that's one of those projects that is like a dream project to work on. Star Wars, right? Like,
yeah.
Get much better than that, dude.
And this was right after the first of the new trilogy, so it was when this was before the whole divided community, and Ryan Roundhead got his hands on the sequel. But so Star Wars has always been a huge part of my life. Just the whole mythos, the world building. I really appreciate artists who take the time to build up worlds around their creation. I think Greg Simpkins' Crayola is his whole fantasy world that he's built around his fine art pieces is absolutely amazing.
Oh, he's such a badass, yeah.
Yeah, I did Designer Con a couple years ago, and he was at the Fighting F4D Studios booth doing some drawing, and I was like geeking out like such a little fangirl, just sitting behind him like, oh, it's
Right?
so
Being
stupid.
there that close so to see it, that's awesome.
But he's just so talented, and the creativity that comes out of his head and being able to twist pop culture in the way that he does is something
Yeah.
to really admire.
And put his own style to it.
Yeah, yeah. Storytelling is really big. Storytelling is something that really I can't stress enough, and I think it's maybe why I'm very hard on myself, because I just see myself as like, another redneck out of New Mexico. There's not much to my story, and but being able to, I love what people have to tell through stories, and if you're able to tell a good story through a piece or through a series of pieces, that's what I try to do, and would hope to do with my artwork, is being able to communicate like a timeless story that people could really resonate with.
Get started on it, dude.
Yeah.
All right, and that, yeah.
We'll see.
One of the things that like I love to touch on with talking to people is like if you were able to go back in time and kind of give some advice to your younger self, what would that be?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think one would be to be more humble and don't rush into things. I think one of the only I've been very fortunate with my career, and it's really hard. This podcast is about discussing your struggles, and I look back on my career, and even through my hardships, I feel just fortunate and blessed. Like that's really so it's hard for me to look back and be deterred by the struggle or really brought down by it. But looking back on my career, I had a lot of opportunities. It seems like come to me easier when I was first starting out, and I don't really feel like my skills matched the opportunities at the time. And so like I almost wish I could tell myself to focus on different aspects more, or take stuff more serious as I was younger, to make something of this of these opportunities that came out. Like one of my first freelance jobs when I was out of college was doing T-shirts for a band called Bayside, and
Amazing band. They're like
they're an amazing band, and I did some really good T-shirts for them for my ability at the time, but I was very ignorant about how the scene worked. Um, I wasn't at a point to where I could do graphics that I would be happy with, but I also would work with a band's budget. Like it took me a couple of years to realize that bands are broke, and
yeah.
and so, but I still enjoy band work, and if I just had that realization earlier, I would be able to have maintained a lot more healthy relationships with some of those connections. I did a art project for school that was used as a promotional material for the First Taste of Chaos tour. So I got to,
R.I.P.
yeah, I got to go backstage with that year. It was Killswitch Engage, Seosin, The Used, and My Chemical Romance. So there's all these bands, and I'm just some dorky art institute college kid, but it was amazing. I got to like watch their sets off the side of the stage, and it was just if I had my crap together back then, what connections would I have built?
Right, yeah. That's true.
I 2008, I was at San Diego Comic Con. I was drinking with Simon Bigsley. I don't know if you know who he is.
I don't
Um,
know.
he's the creator of Lobo. So if you know the DC Comics character Lobo,
Yeah.
I said Simon Bisley. I think I pronounced his name wrong, but he really. I was at a table with him, Kevin Eastman, the creator of Ninja Turtles, who was head over heavy metal at the time. On the other side of the table, you had Nate Van Dyke, and I watched him and Simon later jokingly make out at that bar. And I'm just a young, like, in the middle of all this. Simon was hitting on my girlfriend at the time that night. It was like,
Wow.
I'm just some young scrub thinking that he's the business who is just sitting with all these legends, and I let those opportunities, you know. And so that I really regret. Like I kind of wish I had my business sense and my skill now rather than like the sense of entitlement I had when I was younger. If that makes
Why do you
sense.
think you had that when you were younger?
Well, I think part of it is like I did really well at the Art Institute, and so you think I did well here, I'm going to do well everywhere, which is
Gotcha.
not necessarily true. I think part of it is the arrogance on being on your own for the first time. Like that was like starting a new career,
You're young.
cocky,
Yeah, young and dumb.
young and dumb, and that's it. Just not having the experience to appreciate what you have at the moment.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so,
it sounds like despite all of that, though, man, you still made it and are still doing that. So that part's awesome. I mean, yeah, you look back, but you're still doing your thing. So that's great.
fortunately, yeah, I'm very
Yeah.
very very lucky to do that. And I think for anybody, the key to keep doing that is you got to keep learning. Like the moment that if you're in the creative field, the moment that you've ever felt like you've learned everything there is to learn, or the moment that you feel like, I think I'm good enough at this to move on to something else, I think is the moment you die. Like,
Yeah, you're done.
I know my friends are sick of this, and because I talk bad about myself all the time, but it's a double-edged sword because you know, I'm very hard on my work, but me being hard on my work makes me want to get better. Like I can't. The moment I start easing up on myself is the moment that, I may stop taking this stuff seriously, and I don't want that to happen.
Yeah, dude, you shouldn't. That's if that's your drive, like you got to keep that going. So stick with it.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
just keep learning. Avoid. Yeah. Yeah. It's hard. Like just try not to be so full of myself and be more open to learning and being a nicer person when I was younger, I think is what I tell myself. For new creatives coming up, I stick, be prepared for sacrifice and hard work. That's what it takes to make it. And the field, thanks to technology, all these tools are becoming more accessible to everybody. So that just means you're going to have to work that much harder to stand out. And learn from whoever you can. Value your friendships. I like my career that I have now is all because of my friends who see the value and the talent of what I can do and feeling that I can bring a value to what they're working on. Like I owe everything to those who put their trust in me, and so I try to I keep that trust like something sacred, and I
Very much so.
try to try to keep my word, and try to help those who have helped me any way possible. It's a sad fact that the world is, what have you done for me lately, and we can't really rely on our past efforts to float us through rough spots in our life, and so you just have to keep on working on it and keep doing what you can to build. And at times it's going to feel really daunting because you're going to be like, when am I going to be able to take a break? But if you keep pushing through it, you're going to be happy with where you end up.
Absolutely, dude. Damn, I couldn't have said that better myself. Seriously, that was great, dude.
Sorry.
If if anyone wants to reach out to you, follow you, where could they find you at?
LandonArmstrong.com, and you can find my Instagram off of that. I don't remember my Instagram handle off the top of my head.
Cool. So just LandonArmstrong.com is where you can find all of his connections.
Yeah.
Check out his work. It's badass. So yeah, it's damn good for sure.
Feel free to. I try to. If you have any questions, like I still do. I'm now teaching again, and I'm very fortunate that I had artists show me, like who were willing to teach me when I was starting out. So especially for young people just starting in the career, if you have any questions, I'll try to get out there and get back to you as soon as possible. And if you have anything I can do to help your career, you make it as an artist or give you advice through something, I'll be glad to share. Just wanted to say that. Didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, dude. So just don't be shy and bug the shit out of Landon. It's pretty much what it.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't have enough to do on his plate.
Gotta spread the love, man.
No, yeah, for sure. You got to give back. Pay it forward, dude, right?